right, now to an issue I've been wanting to get to for some time, and that's the issue of mail-in voting. We have seen quite a dust-up over two different parts of this issue, really, the ballot integrity of mail-in voting in general, but also the mass mail-out of ballot applications in Michigan. And let's talk about it with the Secretary of State of Michigan, Jocelyn Benson. And you were, of course, the one who made the decision to send out all those applications. So as I parse these two different sides of it, let's start with whether it was appropriate for you to send the applications to people who didn't request it in the first place. You've been criticized, especially by conservatives, for that.
Yeah, and interestingly, Republican secretaries of state in other states are doing the same thing, and we're all finding great success with it, meaning that there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And it's really important for us as the chief election officers of our states to give people the certainty and the clarity of how to participate safely in our elections this year. And in Michigan, everyone has a right to vote by mail, and it's a new right. It's one that was enacted by voters in 2018. So I actually have a responsibility as the chief election officer of the state of Michigan to ensure people know how to exercise that right. And the other reason why our decision was so important was because, and we saw this in the presidential primary, a number of groups and a number of local clerks are deciding and will decide to also mail applications to residents or list members or group members to vote by mail. And to me, it was important that your ability to vote by mail, the ease of which you can get that application, not be dependent on where you live or what lists you may or may not be on. So for us doing the mailing, make sure everyone has equal footing.
You've already heard, though, of course, that we've seen applications go out to people who have passed away or people who no longer live at that address. And critics say, well, there's proof that this is filled with problems to just send these out in a mass way.
Yeah, it's actually quite the opposite. I mean, there had not been a statewide mailing like this done in 9.5 years in our state. And so, yeah, a lot of those applications are going to reach outdated records in our file. And what that does is actually help us increase the accuracy of our list by updating those files. We're asking everyone, and many have, return those applications unopened to our local clerks or even to our office, which we then forward. And that enables us to use that information to update the voter file effectively in the way that we're legally able to do. So it's actually promoting voter integrity by doing this mailing as well.
Well, that's assuming that all those voters are benevolent voters. Isn't there a way then for me to see, oh, an application came to this house to somebody who used to live here? I can get 2 votes out of this if I want.
But you can't get 2 ballots. You can only get a ballot that's affiliated with your signature. And there's a really strict protection process. We're actually upgrading our signature verification software with the state this election cycle to ensure that when you sign that application, your signature is then matched with your voter file, and that's used to send you a ballot. And that ballot still won't count unless you sign the outside of the envelope as the voter, and then that signature matches all the other signatures. And of course, forgery of a signature, particularly with elections, is a crime. And we have an investigative team already in place at the Department of State that can investigate allegations or any type of evidence, forgery or other types of fraud.
What, in general, the president, of course, has criticized this and criticized you in particular. Where are you on defending the viability of mail-in voting, aside from the ballot application issue, the integrity of basically absentee ballots?
It's so interesting because I'm essentially just defending the will of the voters. The voters enacted this change in our Constitution, and again, it's my job to implement it, and I'm proud to do so. And so in doing that, we're working to educate, and because again, it's a new right, all citizens, in the midst, frankly, of significant partisan efforts to try to sow seeds of doubt in the integrity of the process. But what we have on our side are decades of states led by Republicans and Democrats across the country who have been implementing vote by mail with much success, with infinitesimal levels of fraud, and doing so in a way that voters approve of. And so, I'm proud to be on the side of the voters here. More than 2/3 of our electorate in Michigan support this option to vote by mail. And then we're also working to make sure that in-person option remains available and safe to voters throughout our state this year as well.
Lastly, Jocelyn, you're not a doctor or a health official, but I'm curious as to your outlook for whether or not you are going to want, or Michiganders are going to want to be at the polls in person come August and November.
Well, we have the information gleaned to us by running a local election on May 5th in the height of the pandemic to create a blueprint of exactly how to ensure that all citizens have safe options, even if we are in the height of what we hope is not the case, another wave or any type of health issue, where people will be able to safely vote from home if they choose to. And that's again why this mailing was so important, to give folks that certainty that it will be in place no matter what. And no matter what, we will have a safe in-person option as well. We're working to get PPE, masks, gloves, and the rest to our election workers throughout the state. And we encourage members of the public to sign up to be election workers as well, to help us ensure we're able to fully staff our precincts and provide that safe in-person option also.
Hindsight's 2020, but should we have voted in person in the primary, or would that have been a pretty good time for us to stay home as the start of this?
Well, a significant number of people did vote by mail in that primary. And we know, coronavirus hit our state shortly thereafter. There's no evidence that there was any sort of spread of the virus that we know of through that primary, but we're glad to have the tools in place to ensure safe elections moving forward.
Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, I know we will talk about this more with you as we head toward Election Day. Thanks so much for the time today.
All right, thanks. Good to see you.
You bet. All right, so let's now hear from the other side of the matter. One of the leading critics of Jocelyn Benson's approach is the Kent County Clerk, Lisa Postumus-Lyons. Lisa, thank you so much for being with me today. You're familiar, I think, with the arguments that the clerk has just laid out, but I want to start with these two different issues. There is, of course, the issue of sending out the applications, but let's start with how you feel in general about mail-in balloting, which many people just understand as absentee balloting. Are you okay with the efficacy of that?
I want to be very clear. This issue isn't about whether or not people can or should vote absentee. I support secure absentee voting. In fact, when I was in the legislature, I helped lead the charge to expand no reason absentee voting, much to the chagrin of my own party. So I do support secure absentee voting, the process that we currently have in Michigan. People have the right to cast an absentee ballot, and I think people are aware of that right.
Then we've heard from everyone from the president on down, though, that there's something missing in our security around mail-in voting. And as a clerk, how would you address people's concerns about that?
Whether anybody in Michigan chooses to exercise their right to vote in person on Election Day or via absentee ballot, I want our voters here in Michigan to know that they can cast their ballot with confidence in the security and the integrity of our election. The way our system is set up, it's decentralized here in Michigan, very much administered at the local level. And that's a big advantage when it comes to security and integrity of the election. So that's an advantage. We have a two system check when we verify a voter's signature. We check it when they apply before we send the ballot, and then we check it again when the ballot comes in. We check their signature with a voting file. So Michigan's absentee voting process, as it is secure. And that's what I'm concerned about with what is going on and what these changes the Secretary of State is making.
Well, then given all you've just laid out, what's wrong with sending out applications to everyone?
Well, the bottom line first is it's illegal. There are two court cases that have determined that the election officials only have the authority and power that is expressly granted to them in statute. And nowhere in statute does it provide election officials the ability and authority to send an absentee ballot application unless the voter themselves requests it, either verbally or in writing. So we have that in court case. It's not changed, even though Proposal 3 enacted no reason absentee voting. That changes nothing with regard to the legality and the authority of election officials to do their jobs and what those jobs are. So first, that's a problem. Now, the law could be changed to make it legal, but that's a job for the legislature, not the Secretary of State. And
well, let me ask this, though, because those original cases were local clerks who were sending out, and they were at odds with, at that time, the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State now is Jocelyn Benson, and I guess some would argue that she is the now leading election official, and policy can be set by her on the way to carry out an election. Is there any validity to that argument?
Well, again, going back to what the court cases determined was that elected officials have the power and authority that is only expressly granted to them in statute. And this statute, the election law, does not provide any elected official, any elections official, to send unsolicited absentee ballot applications, whether it's the local or county clerk or the Secretary of State. And so, like I said, I support absentee voting, but I also strongly support the rule of law. And we need to make sure that we're not, that we are conducting our elections as provided for in the Constitution and in our state statutes to ensure and guarantee the confidence that our voters can have that our elections are secure.
So to you, that decision of voters 2 years ago to change it to no reason needing to be offered for absentee voting doesn't change the law itself enough?
It does not change the law. The only impact Proposal 3 had on absentee voting was that it guarantees every voter the right to request and cast a ballot. It does not change any election official's authority or responsibilities to conduct the election.
I've only got about 30 seconds left, Fred, Lisa, but now that all those applications have gone out, if you get your way, if you were to win your argument, how would you rectify it?
Well, this has created a huge mess. We have returned ballot applications going to the state instead of to the local governments, where we're better equipped to clean out the voter rolls. The state plan to clean out the voter rolls as a result of this. Apps are going to dead people, people who have moved, non-citizens, and even 16-year-olds. This is why the law requires voters to request an application. And there are continuous changes. The bottom line is the Secretary of State is using this pandemic as an opportunity to advance an activist agenda without regard to the law, legislative purview, local control, and it really is eroding confidence in the security and integrity of elections here in Michigan.
Lisa Posthumus-Lyons, the Kent County Clerk. Lisa, I so appreciate the time today and the thoughts. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Devin.
You bet. We'll take a quick break. We'll wrap things up for Flashpoint right after this.